Welcome back to the Startup Stage presented by Techstars. Please welcome CEO of the Foundry Group, Brad Feld, and CEO of Fitbit, James Park.
Hey gang, welcome. I'm Brad Feld, it's James Park, co-founder and CEO of Fitbit. And we're going to wrap for about 45 minutes, hopefully cover some stuff over the story of Fitbit that's interesting and exciting to you. James and I spent a lot of time together over the years, but we hadn't seen each other probably in about a year.
About a year, yeah.
So it was nice to have a quick hi again. And my partner Seth Levine, who's here somewhere, was commenting that we remember the first time that Fitbit was at CES. And do you remember the year it was?
That was six CESs ago.
6 CESs ago, and how big was your booth? About the size of that chair, right?
Maybe, yeah. Very last minute.
I haven't been upstairs yet, but my understanding is that the Fitbit booth is all of the top floor now.
Close.
So
it's like a mini house, actually. I was commenting because I went inside because we have all these private conference rooms. It's like you could live there.
Awesome. If anybody needs a place to sleep tonight, Fitbit. James, why don't we start with just a few minutes on the origin story? Like, how did Fitbit get started? How did you come up with the idea for what was going on at the very beginning?
Yeah, so it was started late 2006, and my co-founder at Fitbit, Eric, and I, we've now known each other for about 17 years. We had sold our last company to a company in San Francisco called CNET, which is now part of CBS. And we had to stay there for a couple years to do our earn-out. And then late 2006, that was when Nintendo came out with the Wii. And I remember being super excited, waiting at Best Buy at like 6 a.m. for a few hours, buying it, taking it home, and being just amazed at the way, because the Wii was really the first consumer device that had accelerometers in it. I mean, there are hard drives and things like that, but this was something that consumers could actually use. And I was just really fascinated by the way Nintendo had combined sensors and gaming and made gaming into something that was really active and positive and fun. And so we thought, how do we capture this magic and put it into a more portable form so you get a lot of these benefits outside of the living room? And we left CNET in March 2007. And then started Fitbit pretty much, March, April.
So April 2007.
Yeah, that little.
And when you started Fitbit, it was you and Eric, and what else?
It was just myself and Eric and a few contractors, consultants. We had our now VP of Research, Shelton Yuen, who was just finishing up his PhD at Harvard. So he was helping us out part-time. And then we had one contractor helping us out with firmware, and another contractor helping us out with electrical engineering, and that was it.
So from April 2007 until when? When did you actually have the first thing that you could have thought about looked like a Fitbit?
It was probably by the time we raised our Series A. And when we went and pitched John Callahan at True, we had like a little prototype, and we had an industrial design appearance model. And I have to say, it's kind of weird, but we couldn't get a lot of interest from investors when we just had like a circuit board and some stuff. But when we had a fake object that looked really nice, then all of a sudden people got interested. So it was a weird psychological thing that. One of the first things I learned.
How were you pitching Fitbit at that point in time? So you meet with John Callahan, who's a partner at True, and you show him a fake piece of plastic. And what is it that you're telling him? Why should he care about this?
Well, actually, I forgot what I was saying back then. So actually, around the IPO, I went back and looked at original pitch decks. And a little bit embarrassed by them, the quality and content of all of that. But I think in the one of the first two slides, we said it's a personal trainer and nutritionist automated personal trainer and nutritionist in your pocket. That was kind of like the pitch. So not too different than where we kind of are today.
Yep.
So that original vision, I think, still held true, which was something new to me and Eric because the previous two startups we had founded, we didn't know, there was no word for it back then, but we pivoted like every 6 months.
Yeah.
And Fitbit was really, we held true to our original vision from day one.
So you raised a round from True and from SoftTech. Was that the first money that you raised?
No, originally we raised about $400K from a little bit from myself and Eric because of the proceeds that we had got from our last company. And then it was my boss at CNET, Eric's dad, and Eric's grandfather. So kind of scraped.
True friends and family.
Yeah, true friends and family. We just kind of scraped the round together. And we thought $400K, that's enough. That'll take us to production and launch.
No problem.
No problem. We've got it. We've got the budget, all these numbers in a spreadsheet, looks great. We added a little bit of fudge factor, $400K, solid.
And how did that go?
We ran out of $400K pretty quickly.
Yeah. And so you raised how much from John in that next round?
I think we raised a couple million from John and Jeff, and I think it was really based on, we were at TechCrunch 50, which was the second TechCrunch 50, now Disrupt, or I don't know what it's called now, today. And we went on stage, and we had a prototype in a balsa wood box that we demoed. That more or less, it kind of worked. Worked well enough for the demo.
And it kind of counted steps, kind of.
Yeah, the demo was, I asked the audience to give me a random number, and then I would walk that number of steps, and then I would tell Eric to refresh, and then the screen would refresh with the updated number of steps. And what I didn't know was, so I knew like exactly how I needed to walk to get the steps to register, and that didn't prevent the laptop from crashing in the middle of the demo. So Eric had about 30 seconds to reboot a Windows laptop and get the software back up and running,
Awesome.
Which I didn't realize at the time. So there were no patches or updates that needed to be installed as part of the reboot process, luckily.
Good. Good. So you reboot.
Reboot.
You wander across the stage. And what happened at that TechCrunch 50? Because I remember a little bit of urban lore about what happened from there. So
the demo worked well enough. And then I also told people that we would be shipping at Christmas. So everyone was super excited, got a lot of applause.
This was Christmas 08.
I didn't say which year.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was September of 2008. So it could have, I don't know what I was implying, but
Yeah.
I just said Christmas. And then everyone applauded, it was great. And we got off stage, and I think before we had made a bet as to, hey, how many people are gonna give us a pre-order, give us their credit card information, because Kickstarter wasn't around back then, so we kind of had to jury rig everything together. And actually the day before, or the weekend before the conference, realized we didn't have a website or any way to take pre-orders. So I took photographs of models who were my friends wearing the Fitbit. Maybe we had like 8 photographs of the device on the website, and literally 3 paragraphs about what the device did. And we used Yahoo Shopping Cart to collect people's credit card information. I don't think it was PCI compliant at the time. So yeah, we thought, okay, this website looks really sketchy. Maybe 5 people will give us their credit card information. No, Eric said 5, and I said he was being too pessimistic, that it would be like 50. And so by the end of the first day, we had about a couple thousand pre-orders. So that was,
we're onto something.
That was pretty good. 2,000 times 100. We're talking some real money there.
Yep. So SoftTech and True put in about $2 million.
Yeah, and that was right when Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Yep. Good timing. So
September, yeah. And I was nervously calling John to see if they were still going
to send the money. All right, so you're going to ship in Christmas. It's September. Yeah. When did you actually start shipping?
Christmas.
Yeah, that same year? Next year?
Yeah.
So what happened between that Christmas and the actual Christmas that you shipped?
Everyone's experienced the Kickstarter project, so
Well, but this is before Kickstarter, so the
Yeah,
idea
we
that it takes
pioneered.
12 extra months.
Yeah, we pioneered that
You were
concept.
trendsetters.
Yes. And actually, I've talked to a few hardware companies, done Kickstarters in the past, and they said they actually looked at our blog. So I created a blog and Flickr account and like kept people entertained over a year. Posting photos of our trips to Singapore and Indonesia, talked about what we're doing. And I had a couple hardware companies much later come up to me and said, hey, we really read your blog and stuff to learn how to keep people from rioting and storming the office and burning everything down because the product had been delayed so much. So I feel I've also saved a few lives in the process.
That's good. So it took you about 15 months from that TechCrunch to ship. And what were your and Eric's life like during that 15 months? Because it was a time frame, like today there's tons of companies that are making consumer electronics and hardware's in vogue again, but in 2008, 2009, there were maybe 3 companies that were venture backed that were making hardware, and you were one of them. So what were you figuring out, and how did you live your life during that period of time?
Pretty leisurely.
Yeah.
Yeah, woke up.
You hung out and just waited for the contract manufacturers
Read the newspaper,
to come to you.
yeah, all that stuff. Just tossed some designs over to Asia, waited around the week, did nothing, We actually spent a lot of time in Asia. I think I lived in Singapore and Indonesia for about 4 months. Not at once, but maybe like a month at a time, trying to bring up the production lines. A lot of expensive mistakes, failures. But that whole experience was pretty invaluable because Eric and I got to experience pretty much every aspect of getting a hardware company up and running, from managing hardware engineers to overseeing production, quality, logistics. I remember spending a whole week evaluating third-party logistics providers, visiting them, trying to understand what made one company better than the other, and we ended up picking a warehouse and logistics provider in Healdsburg, California. We picked that primarily because we could drive out there in case something went wrong. And so many things went wrong, so it was a good choice.
Yep.
For it to be close. So I would say, that year and a half was a very intense educational experience.
And how much background did you and Eric have on consumer electronics products prior to that year?
A semester in school.
Semester in school, so basically none. So
none, and I didn't even finish school, so...
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
you're another one of those. You're another one of those super successful entrepreneurs who didn't finish.
But I did take that one class. Eric didn't, so I was ahead.
Okay, good.
He had the degree, he had a master's too, but I was more educated for the task at hand.
How did it feel that moment that you got the first box with the Fitbit in it produced?
I would say really exciting, but also scared. And I was scared because, having seen the sausage being made, not 100% confident in the product.
Yeah.
Especially since this wasn't software, we couldn't fix it and patch it once we released it. Once we shipped it, that was that. And, to be honest, the quality of the early units could have used some work. But I think the amazing thing about those early days of Fitbit is that we tapped into such an intense interest and passion by our users for this type of product that people just ignored a lot of the early problems, and they just wanted it, which was really amazing to see.
So that first product shipped Christmas 2009.
Yeah.
How many units did you sell, do you remember, in 2009?
We shipped about 5,000 units in 2000.
5,000 units in 2009.
Yeah, we had about a pre-order list of maybe 25 to 30,000 at that time, and we're producing as quickly as we could, and we managed to get 5,000 out after a couple months of production.
And lifetime to date, what's the public number that y'all talk about in terms of number of units that you've got out in the world?
54 million.
54 million. So from 5,000 at the end of 2009 to 54 million today.
Yeah.
That's pretty substantial. How many people had one of the original Fitbit Ultras? Anybody? Couple. Do you remember if you pulled it like a wishbone on a chicken a little too much, it would snap? Okay. And I'm just curious, how many people in the audience have or have had a Fitbit? That's pretty remarkable. How does that feel?
Pretty good.
Pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. How many steps do you have today, by the way?
10,257.
All right, I'm at 9,400, so I got some work to do. You got shorter legs than me, so he gets more steps. So, do you remember meeting me for the first time?
Vaguely. Was it over a phone call or video?
Phone call.
Okay.
First time we talked was a phone call.
Yeah. Was this part of the Series A or A1 or?
It was when you were trying to raise the Series B.
Okay.
But you didn't.
The first time. Yeah.
And you ended up doing a Series A1 without me. And I'll just describe the phone call, but then let's talk about sort of the next year. The phone call was, I live in Colorado, and it was during a snowstorm, not dissimilar to the snowstorm that happened in Colorado yesterday. And I was at my house in the mountains, and I was very distracted because the power was going in and out, and my dog was outside, and Jeff Clavier from Softtech had really encouraged me to talk to James because they were trying to raise his financing, and Jeff's a good promoter, so he's very good at sort of calling up and saying, you got to pay attention, And I did this 30-minute phone call with James, and pretty much my entire goal was during that phone call was to get off the phone. Like I wasn't in any sort of headset or mindset about investing. I was interested in the idea of human-computer interaction, but I hadn't really processed this notion of what a Fitbit was or why I would want to instrument myself yet. We were just sort of the very beginning of that thought process. So we had a call. The next time we interacted was video when I was at my place in Alaska in the summertime, and that was really the beginning of the financing that turned into financing that was a Series B.
Series B.
So to talk about that time frame between that first phone call with me where you got blown off quickly by a guy who was distracted to that next time when we actually connected, and what was the journey like getting there from the 5,000 ship to that point?
That was 2011,
2010.
Right? 2010? Okay. I have to dredge back.
Too long ago.
Yeah. It was crazy. So that first year, 2009, we shipped 5,000, generated about 500K in revenue. And then the next 2010, we did about 5 million in revenue. So that was about 10x.
Yeah.
And we shipped about 50,000 devices. And we're still a small company. We're probably about fewer than 10 people still at the time. So it's still nonstop, 24/7, like flying back and forth overseas. Definitely the contract manufacturer was not someone that we could leave unattended. I don't know how people can get into so much trouble, but yeah, I mean, it was not, fire and forget. Literally had to babysit every step of the process. So I was responsible. So Eric and I split our time between, I was mainly responsible for hardware and production, and Eric was responsible for the software, but I was still actually writing a lot of code at the time as well in between all the hardware issues that would pop up. Because I think the last time I stopped checking in code was like 2011.
Yep.
So still coding for a little bit. So I think the intervening time period was we were trying to raise money and there was a lot of rejection. I think we talked to about 40 VCs. I mean, I still have the Google Doc that has all the investors and like red, green, yellow, and then it'd start off green, and then they'd turn yellow, and then all of it would turn red. So that was the intervening time period.
All right, so you had a 9-month period where you're trying to raise money. You got about 40 rejects. We eventually ended up leading that round, which was us, True, and Softtech, and really nobody else.
Yeah.
I think Benioff put some money in that round, or was he in the previous round? Or
no, he might have put money in that round, or he purchased some shares from other people.
Somewhere in that.
Yeah.
But I remember sort of that moment in time very clearly where I got an email from both Jeff Clavier at Softtech and John Callahan at True. And John sent me a very sort of polite, all the three of us have been friends for a while, we've done things together, sort of this very polite, email saying, you should really pay attention. I know you passed the last time, but James and Eric have made a ton of progress. And by now I had a Fitbit Ultra. I think I might have even broken one, and was on my second, and I was kind of into the product. And so John's email was like, okay, that's kind of nice. And then Jeff sent me an email the next day after whatever my response to John's was, so I'm sure they coordinated. And Jeff, for those of you that don't know him, is French, and he can be very, very direct sometimes. And he sent me an email that basically was, Brad, don't be fucking stupid. You need to pay attention to this. And I kind of knew I reached out to Jeff and John and said, hey, this is why I wasn't that into it the first time. And Jeff sent me back, re-forwarded me that email, and said, save this email. And I said, all right, I'll pay attention. So I ended up investing, spending time with James, got very turned on, and recently, it's an investment that hasn't closed yet and it hasn't been announced, but recently Jeff forwarded me that email again about this other company that I'm about to invest in. And he refers to it now as the Fitbit fucking stupid email. That he doesn't send me very often, but every now and then, just like pay attention. So I think it's a sort of a testament both to having great early stage investors who were patient and supportive, but then who were very forceful, not across 40 VCs, but probably only across a couple.
Yeah.
That they knew they could be forceful with in that moment in time because of that VC. So we do the Series B. It's $10 million financing or $12 million financing, something like that. And you come out with the One, which is the second product, so sort of the Ultra next step up. And I remember once the One came out, things started to really move. So talk about that time.
Yeah, that was, for its time, a pretty revolutionary product because, and the reason it took off is our original products, the Classic and the Ultra, that was before Bluetooth Low Energy and any type of mobile phone connectivity, because smartphones, the iPhone just came out in 2007. There were no third-party apps or developer tools, et cetera. So to get data from our device to the cloud or the back end or whatever, we had to develop our own base station that you'd plug into a computer. And it would be this persistent background thing. Every time you walk by the base station, all the data that had been collected would magically upload to our back end. And that was fine, but people wouldn't leave their laptop on all the time, or they'd shut off their desktop. So it wasn't a truly ambient experience. And we had been tracking the progress of Bluetooth Low Energy for a while, and we'd been waiting, okay, when's the first phone that's going to come out that carries this? And originally the Fitbit One had been designed with the same proprietary radio chipset that we had shipped in the previous generation device along with the base station. And then when Apple announced that the new iPhone, or we heard rumors or something, that they're going to include Bluetooth Low Energy, we basically stopped design work on the old radio design and switched to including Bluetooth Low Energy. That actually caused a delay of about 6 months. So that was a conscious decision that we had to make where, okay, we'll forego any revenue for 6 months to make this switch, which for a company of our size was a pretty big decision.
Yep.
It's like, will Apple launch with it? Will they not? We don't know. We'll make that bet. And luckily Apple did. And the whole connectivity, direct connectivity between our device and the smartphone was really a game-changing feature, and that's really when the business took off. So the first, I talked a little bit about our revenue progress. We did about $500K the first year, $5 million. With the launch of the Fitbit One and the Zip, which was our low-cost tracker, which also used Bluetooth Low Energy, we went to $15 million and then $76 million. So literally, I didn't think that it was possible, but we took a hardware company and grew it 5x in revenue in a year.
I remember that really well because we had been involved in a number of companies over the years that have grown really quickly. And at that point, the company that had, for me, the steepest trajectory of sort of the next generation of companies since sort of 2007 forward was Zynga, which we were invested in, which had gone from 14 million or 15 million to about 50 million, maybe 60. And the idea that Fitbit grew at a faster pace was something that we had just no expectation. We didn't have a mental model for it. Now, this period of time, if I remember correctly, the phrase that people were using to describe Fitbit's product was a fitness tracker.
Yeah, fitness tracker, activity tracker.
That sort of thing. And I remember at the time, as a category, there was an awful lot of sort of noise from people about, well, who would ever really want one of these things? It's just like a digital pedometer.
Yep.
What was the vision, if you remember, that you and Eric had that took you beyond this notion of a digital pedometer? And maybe go back to that beginning thought of that, that crappy early plan that talked about a health and nutrition, whatever.
So it's actually interesting to talk about pedometer because, I think investor pitches, you always have to do, okay, what's the size of the market? And then you always try to look at what's an existing market. And so we try to explain what the device did early on as it's kind of like a pedometer. And here's the pedometer market. But the pedometer market, at least in North America, wasn't very exciting at all. So I think that was part of the problem in us having difficulty raising money, is that people looked at the pedometer market, it's like, I don't know, it's small, it doesn't sound very exciting. It was very difficult to convince people that this was actually a new category of device that kind of looked like the old category, but would broaden the addressable market in such a dramatic way due to certain things that it did. And the certain things that it did that were different, we felt, was this idea that we could make what was previously invisible visible to people through sensors and data. And by making this information visible, that it's the idea of any type of business or goal that you're trying to achieve, once you see the data, that you can use it to set goals and measurably improve yourself over time.
Yep.
So that was, I think, the powerful thing. And that kernel of an idea persists today. I mean, we've added more sensing capability. Heart rate was a big one that we added a couple years ago, but the basic idea is still there where, look, you need the data first, and then you need a lot of software magic on top of it that will give people guidance that's personalized and personalized coaching on top of it that utilizes that data in a smart way and guides people towards an outcome.
So you're on about a product cycle of about once a year or so, and you had this growth from 15 million to 70 something million, and then you grew again about 5x, right? From 70 million to 300 and something million.
Yeah, we got close to 300.
And what was the product that caused that? And did that change the characteristic of the market and the way people thought about the market?
That was still the Fitbit One and the Fitbit Zip, but really what was changing at the time was we started hitting our stride in terms of distribution, because primarily we had been selling online through word of mouth. Like, we had been doing zero marketing.
So $70 million, almost no marketing.
Pretty much zero marketing, other than the fact that we had a social network, leaderboards on the app, and people would buy one and try to get their friends and family to buy one. That was it. That was the extent of marketing. Maybe I was still writing articles on the blog, but I don't think that was driving 70-something million in sales. So the jump from 300 to 750, and I think 750, that jump was really us entering distribution in a major way. So Best Buy was a big one. I think at that time we maybe had about 10,000 storefronts.
Yep.
And we were really investing in channel marketing, POP displays. So while we're spending our first ever real marketing dollars, they were being invested in channel marketing, which I feel is one of the most efficient, effective ways to spend your dollars, because you buy these displays, they're put in stores. Not only are they carrying your inventory, but they're selling your product at the same time. They're not only selling and advertising your product to consumers, but they're also educating the staff at the stores as well, because the staff at the stores, they don't really have that much. I mean, they're just wandering around the store all day. So every time they'd pass your POP, they'd learn incrementally more and more about your product. So all that stuff started to develop over time, and it all started to snowball.
Great. So two last questions, sort of in the pre-going public, ramping up to be a public company version of Fitbit. this is incredibly fast growth, at a breakneck pace. What were some of the hardest things that you had to deal with? I mean, like, not all smooth sailing through this. I mean, talk about one or two complete oh shit moments that you had along the way.
There were definitely many. The biggest one for us was we had a product recall of our just launched flagship product, which was called the Fitbit Force. It was our second wrist-based product, and the first one with alphanumeric display and caller ID and things like that. So we shipped out maybe 600,000 or 700,000, and then people started exhibiting signs of skin irritation, et cetera. And we started shipping during Christmas, and by January we realized we had a pretty big problem on our hands. And we weren't a very well capitalized company still. I'm trying to think how much money we'd raised up to that point. I think it was still 20.
No, we'd raised the money from SoftBank. So we had about.
Oh, was that the 40? Okay.
We had about 65 million raised
we
at that point.
We had raised about 65 million at that point, but we were doing 300 million in revenue. We had all this inventory. So from a balance sheet perspective, it was still pretty dicey.
I remember a board call where the best case, worst case had us. Worst case was still only 2 digits on the numerator of millions on the negative side. So at least we weren't 3 digits of millions on the negative side in the worst case.
Yeah.
But I remember that.
It was a really tough event because I think when we calculated out the exposure, the liability, including inventory, stuff that we owed the suppliers, our retail partners, it was close to $100 million in liabilities that we're facing. Yeah. And so it was I think we figured we could manage it, but it was really a short-term cash flow situation where we could take the $100 million hit as long as we had about 5 or 6 months to do it. If we had to absorb it in 2 months, it was pretty much a non-starter.
Yep.
Yeah, so really it was a mad scramble for the whole company. So literally, the sales team had to get the Force off the shelves, and then they had to get all of our other products, including Fitbit Flex and One and Zip, to occupy all the other pegs. We had to convince the retailers to fill the pegs that had become vacant with our products rather than our competitors' products. So that's challenge one. Challenge two is negotiating with all of our suppliers to extend out our liabilities over a longer period of time. And then the third challenge was maintaining consumer confidence in the company and the product as well. So during that process, we did a formal recall with the CPSC, a lot of legal regulatory issues that we had to work through. We had a bunch of class action lawsuits, which were incredibly painful. So just it was a very complex situation across the board. And yeah, that one stands out.
Thanks for helping me relive that. I've had 3 times as an adult investor where after I've gotten off a board call, I've gone in the bathroom and thrown up.
I'm glad it could help there.
Fortunately, only one of those 3 was a Fitbit board call.
And the scary thing, Brad, is that I think I isolated you from the
really bad shit.
Yeah,
there's no question. We would have every night we had a board call scheduled, and sometimes it would be canceled or it would last for a minute, and other times it would last for an hour or 2, and this was for about a 30-45 day period. Yeah. And you could feel the days where what we were getting was it was really bad, but you just really didn't want to have experienced the last 12 hours that just led up to this as we sorted through it. Let's talk, so that's on the bad side. So you navigated through that. Let's talk about, you had this relatively small set of investors. You had a lot of investors who passed, on the company all the way through. Maybe end this with one great thing about the dynamics that you had with your investors, and one thing that, as you have it playing back over time, you're like, if I had this to do all over again, I would have done this differently in the context of investors.
I think the thing that worked out really well is that it was a small group of investors. Our cap table was pretty clean, and that I think there was a lot of cohesiveness on the board, and I think everyone was. I'm trying to explain the board. Think about the board dynamics. Like, it was a group that had no egos, and was just very focused on, getting stuff done, and I think that was great. And when I think back on our fundraising process, I think at some points we were so desperate, like if someone just gave us money, we'd take them on board. And now looking back, I realized, well, that would have been a total disaster, because I really appreciated the patience and the thoughtfulness that all of you guys had, even during the worst of times, and that was super invaluable,
Cool.
totally invaluable. Cool. And I think that was definitely a key ingredient in our success.
Let's talk about the shift to going public. You're a private company up until middle of 2015. And I kind of remember the first conversations about it being maybe summer of 2014. And the run-up to going public, what do you remember of that as major moments in time that as a CEO of previously an incredibly fast-growing private company, you had to start thinking differently about your life and what you were doing?
Well, I usually ask that question every year. It's just like, hey, I know my job role is changing every year. Is this still what I want to do? And every year it's been an emphatic yes. I think the biggest transition I had was when I stopped coding. So that was a big one. And I stopped knowing exactly what was going on in the software and the hardware. So that was a tough transition, but I don't think anyone wants me back in there in any form or shape. I think they're still fixing my bugs. I think some of the big things were just thinking more about the internal operations. So a lot of stuff, I think just naturally had been neglected for a while just due to our pace of growth. So a lot of it, for instance, systems. We ran on QuickBooks until about 300 million in revenue. It's scary. And I remember I talked to Scott Cook and he said, yeah, I think you guys definitely were the biggest customer on QuickBooks. We were at the point where we had because QuickBooks had a 25-person simultaneous user login limit. So we had to schedule people to log in so that they wouldn't conflict. And we also ran into 2 gigabyte file size limit for their database. And then we didn't know anyone into it, so we had to call the standard customer support to ask them, hey, what happens when we hit this file size limit? They're like, I don't know, no one's ever done
Why are you calling me? Go away.
So that was like 0.10, we got to switch our financial system. So, and then, part of that, we ended up switching to NetSuite really quickly in like 3 or 4 months, just due to this pressure. And then, we hired CFO Bill Zarella, who was really instrumental in just getting us ready for the IPO in record time. I mean, you were there.
Yeah.
Like, when we thought about the process, I don't think we were in some pretty bad shape internally for going public.
Well, Bill joined in the summertime, right?
Yeah.
And the summer of 14, and we launched the IPO process internally, formally, right after New Year's, beginning of 15.
Yeah, we had the banker bake-offs in December, and we had the org meeting in January.
And then the company was public by June of 15.
Yeah, 6 months from banker bake-offs to going public.
Yep. So you've been a public company for about a year and a half. Reflecting back on it, anything you would do differently? Anything that's been awesome for the company? Like, what's been the sort of arc of that?
I think it's been awesome. I mean, we treated it as, definitely a liquidity event for all the investors, but it was a financing event for the company. Like, we had always been pretty thinly capitalized. And so the IPO, I still think it's the biggest ever consumer electronics IPO in history. We ended up through a combination of primary and secondary raising, over $800 million, which for a company, that had struggled so hard to raise 60 million, I was like, hey, this is great. And it was great to see all that money on our balance sheet, and I think being able to sleep at night for the first time about our balance sheet. That was really great. I think the thing that changed the most was, in a private company with a small set of investors that had been with the company through ups and downs for a long period of time, shifting to a public investor base that, you could argue is more impatient for results and maybe a little bit more difficult to communicate with because, with you guys, I could tell you everything that was going on, future roadmaps.
Whether we wanted to know it or not.
Exactly. And, with public investors, it's very orchestrated and you have to be careful. It's like, I always am excited to tell people about new stuff that we're working on. And it's weird, like, for me to not be able to do that, especially with investors. So that was just a shift myself where, you have to keep people excited, especially big shareholders, but you can't tell them everything. That's been tough.
Yeah. You made a couple of announcements in the last few days. I don't know how many people have heard about them. Kind of share about what your 2017 vision for what Fitbit's going after that you're talking about this week.
Yeah, I think, the overall vision of the company, it's really remained the same. I think we've crystallized it better over the years, but it's really to make everyone in the world healthier and doing it from a consumer's point of view. Because I think that's an important distinction where there's a lot of great things happening in the healthcare system, but without consumers being excited about these things, and you're never really going to achieve the full benefits of a lot of this technology. And so, the way I think about it is we want Fitbit to be a central part of the healthcare ecosystem. And moving from what people think is kind of a nice to have to a need to have. And the analogy that I draw is with automobiles. Think about airbags and seatbelts. There was a time where those weren't standard equipment in cars, but today you'd be crazy to get into a car. At least I hope you'd think you'd be crazy to get into a car without a seatbelt or airbag. And you see all these things about driverless car systems today, kind of a novelty. They're really cool, but you can definitely imagine a world where you'd be crazy to get into a car that didn't have autonomous driving just because of the safety issues involved. And I want Fitbit to be the same way, where people would be crazy to not wear a Fitbit when they leave the house because of all the profound positive impacts on your health that it could have, or all the profound things health-wise that it could prevent or screen just by wearing the device and participating in the ecosystem. That's where I see the future of Fitbit, and we're investing a lot in sensors that our team's developing internally, low power technology, and more importantly, all the software magic on top of it. So for me, while it's been about 10 years, it still feels like the very early days of this whole consumer-driven, sensor-driven revolution in healthcare. And that keeps me excited every day.
Awesome. Got a bunch of, we're in Eureka Park, a bunch of entrepreneurs that are early in the life of their business, might be 5, 10, 20, 50 people. Any advice for them looking back over the last 10 years of things that you've had to hold on to get to this point?
Be prepared for a lot of gray hair, because I know
you didn't have any gray hair the first time I met you.
No, and honestly, I've talked to suppliers who I hadn't seen in 3 or 4 years, and the first thing they say, hey, you have a lot of gray hair. I'm like, this isn't the way to sell me your components and parts by telling me this first. Raise sufficient capital. I think mistakes are obviously pretty expensive, and looking back, while I always have this mental exercise of, okay, what's the least amount of money that we could have raised and still succeeded? Because think about dilution and all those things. I think that's really the wrong way to think about it. Raise sufficient capital, have the right investor base, because I think, especially in hardware, there's a lot of ups and downs. Things can go tragically wrong very quickly, and they're not easily correctable. So having a great set of investors who are very experienced in all the nuances and challenges of investing in a hardware company, I think is critically important. And I think chemistry is really critical too. I think I realize that now more than ever, whether it's investors, the board, employees, the management team, all of that. So those are some words of advice.
Well, James, I'll end with saying that my experience being an investor and working
with you and with Eric and the rest of the Fitbit team over the years is one of the most rewarding experiences I've had as an investor and as an adult. So thanks for the opportunity to do it.
It's been, it was awesome working with you.
And let's give James a hand for spending some time with us today. All right.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.